Well, somebody that's very vocal in their support of hunting and loves to go hunting himself is none other than Mr. Nigel Farage, who had this to say on the subject earlier on this morning.
Community, which has had to adapt to not really hunting, but has still managed to maintain many of its traditions. And remember, these days there are big coming together of country people. We've got a beer tent over here, very good, local brew, coffees, burgers, and it's a big social event. It's a big thing in people's calendar, and it's all about people going out riding, seeing the wonderful dogs, and actually having fun. And I get the feeling that PETA and others, what they really object to is people actually enjoying themselves. So I would say very clearly, leave trail hunting alone.
Well, that's Nigel's view, and of course that's part of the issue, isn't it? That it's not just about going out there killing foxes, it's about the social aspect to it, it's about rural communities coming together. And as a last word, I said to somebody from the hunt today, I said, well, how do you answer that attack, that criticism that it's immoral, that it's cruel to animals? And he said, well, it's not cruel to animals because we're not killing foxes anymore. That's it from me. Back to you.
All right, Jeff, Moody there, thank you very much for your time, as ever. Joining us now to look at some of the legalities around fox hunting is the lawyer, Andrew Eborn. Andrew, very Merry Christmas to you,
Merry Christmas, happy Boxing Day,
yes.
From boxing to foxing.
Well, indeed.
Always a thrill. And what I love about your programme is that you always shine more light and less heat. And people talk about loopholes and so on and so forth. I think it's important to know what the law actually says. And it's all covered by the Hunting Act of 2004, which basically banned fox hunting in England, Scotland and Wales, but it's still legal in Northern Ireland. And what that basically means is that you can do something instead, which they call trail hunting. In other words, they put a little scent out and everybody gets on their horses and get all the regalia on, and all the hounds go chasing. They're not called dogs, they're hounds. All the hounds go chasing after this scent. Now, people always talk about the loopholes, but they don't explain what those loopholes are. And it goes down to most criminal actions, which is about intent. So for every crime, there are two things. There's what's called the actus reus, which is the deed of the crime, and the other is the mental state. In other words, you have to intend to do something, what's called the mens rea. Now, often what happens is with these scents, they use a particular scent of a fox or whatever. The hounds then pick up the scent of a real fox, and they go chasing after it. Now, in that instance, it's very difficult to prove intent that you wanted to hunt. And I think that's the sort of key issue on that sort of thing. So when they're drilling down in it, we need to put that in perspective.
So what are Labour proposing to do then? They're saying we'll get rid of all of these loopholes outright?
Well, it's an interesting one because nobody really defines the loopholes other than what we've spoken about. I don't think PETA and so on and so forth. I think Nigel's wonderful for certain things. I don't think they're there to stop fun. I think they're worried about animal cruelty. So if they're sort of turning round and saying, well, actually, these hounds should do trail hunting and it's a glorious part of country life, then there should be a safe way of doing that sort of stuff. I think we need to work out what is actually happening in reality about these foxes. So,
Andrew, how much of a threat to the communities in which this is taking place are foxes as pests, for example?
Yeah, and it's a great question because people often say, look, they're vermin, this is what they're doing. And actually, I was looking at the stats beforehand. Only about 9% of lambs who die are killed through foxes. And they talk about the fox in the chicken coop and so on and so forth. And what's extraordinary, I was discussing this earlier today, is looking at some of these urban foxes, which are a bit worrying now, which you've got on that sort of basis. And what we're going to do about those, because those really are vermin. Those are the ones who are attacking small dogs. They're going through rubbish and so on and so forth. So we do need, and there's two separate things. One is pest control, to the extent they are pests. The other is the legal activity of, are you allowed to hunt them? The answer is no. So is there a loophole? Well, possibly if you're talking about intention, but the reality is that it's going to be very, very difficult to prove. Also, it's a vote divider, if you like.
It is.
And what's happening is Tony Blair and his people are sort of turning around and saying, well, it was a mistake to ban it. Because they're worried they're going to lose a lot of the countryside vote. And I think whilst people say, well, that's only a small vote, the reality is you need every vote in this particular instance.
You know, I remember in the 2017 election, you remember Theresa May sort of prevaricated and said, well, I would have it as a free vote in the House of Commons. I remember my mother, Andrew, turning around and saying, well, I'm not going to vote Conservative, so incensed by this idea of reopening that debate and discussion up. There are so many people in our emails so irate about this discussion.
And if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. That's what P.T. Barnum used to say. What's going to happen as well, Darren, is the National Cyber Security said, look, this particular coming election will have the most use of AI. It's going to be a massive weapon. I can guarantee there'll be all sorts of recordings of people saying they're in favour of fox hunting when that's not true at all.
All right, Andrew Eborn, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your insight. Foxy, with red, in red, foxy in red.
Matches my eyes.
I'm Darren Grimes, and you're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel.